So, welcome everybody to the North Atlantic Fire Science Exchange's student webinar series for the spring of 2025. My name is Eric Evanson. I'm the Science Communications Specialist here at NAFC. Now, the goal of our student webinar series is to allow students to present their work, connect up with the fire and forestry community to develop productive and positive working relationships, as well as exchanging knowledge. And speaking of exchanging knowledge, I just kind of wanted to point out, just as a reminder, that NAFC is part of the Joint Fire Science Program's Fire Science Exchange Network. And there's actually 15 exchanges across the country. You can see there in the map. They're all doing great work when it comes to fire science, and the Joint Fire Science Program also very productive in the fire science world. To see all of that great work, you can simply go to that website up there, firescience.gov. So for today, wanted to introduce our talk. It's the effects of silvicultural prescribed burns on northern red oak regeneration near its northern range limit. And our presenter today is Khanh Ton from the University of New Hampshire. And Khanh has received a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Sciences from Rhodes College and will be graduating this May from the University of New Hampshire with a master's in natural resources and the environment and a graduate certificate in geospatial science. Now, the way it'll play out today is Khanh will go ahead and give her presentation, and then we'll finish up with a Q&A session at the very end. So during her talk, if you have any questions, feel free to just pop those in the chat, and then we will revisit those at the end. And then we'll close out with just a reminder for everybody that we still have 2 more sessions in our student webinar series, our spring 2025 edition. We'll let you know about those and ways that you could get involved if that's something that you choose. So before we get started, I just would love to have you all kind of see who's out there. And if you wanted to pop your name and affiliate in the chat, that would be great at this time. We've got quite a few people on the call today. There we go. Thank you, Tyler. Alicia Black from the Maine Forest Service. Just so you know, she's on a fire assignment outside of Amarillo, Texas right now. So we've got some UNH folks, Judith, Eva, who we'll see in a couple of weeks, Matt Olson from Stockton University. Thanks, Matt, for joining. We've got Ken. So quite a few people from a wide area today across the Northeast. So again, we really appreciate you joining us today. So why don't we go ahead and get started. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand it over to Khanh, and she can introduce herself and start in on her presentation. So thank you very much for joining us today, Khanh.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric, for your introduction. I'm going to need you to give me a thumbs up or something if my screen is here. This is the most fun part of the presentation. It all goes downhill from here. Hmm? Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Eric, I saw you're nodding. Good. All right, everyone. So my presentation today is on my research during my grad school years. And I'm actually the faculty this week. So this is really sweet. I was telling Eric earlier that this is like one of my last presentations in public, so I'm happy that you all can be here. I saw a lot of familiar faces, but also ones that I haven't recognized. So I'm glad that I will be able to talk to you about my work, which looks at the effects of silvicultural prescribed burns on northern red oak regeneration near its northern range limit. So this work is a collaboration between the University of New Hampshire, Cornell University, the Forest Service, as well as the Northeastern States Research Cooperative. And the co-PIs for this project is Dr. Matthew Vadabonker and Dr. Natalie Cleveland. And my slides. Okay, there we go. So, just a little bit about me. Eric has already touched on some of this. I would just like to add that I have previously worked in a variety of eastern landscapes, including an urban oak grove forest in Memphis, Tennessee, which is where I went to college. Um, and then when I was interning in Bald Head Island Conservancy in North Carolina, so there I worked with a maritime forest, and then I spent a semester away my junior year in Woods Hole, Massachusetts with the Marine Biological Laboratory. So there I was doing some work with the sandplain heathland um, at the Cape Cod National Seashore. And I guess the one commonality of these ecosystems and the research questions that I've worked with are like my interest in disturbances impacts on forest regeneration and structural recoveries. Like for example, in Maha Island, I looked at hurricane impacts. And then in the Heathland in Cape Cod, I looked at the effects of atmospheric nitrogen deposition and prescribed burns. And so disturbances that I'm interested in are both natural as well as like intended by management. And as you can see from the title, my study looks at how prescribed burns, which is a very popular silvicultural tool in the South, um, but not as familiar up here, could potentially be used as part of this promotion of regeneration of northern widow. And so just a little bit of an introduction on the species. I know most of y'all in the webinar live and work up in the Northeast, but it doesn't harm to go through some of it. So northern red oak is a economically and ecologically important species in this area. It has very high timber value and wood density, which makes it very um, priceless to the logging industry. It's also a food source for a lot of animals, from like insects like weevils, to bigger animals like squirrels, turkeys, deers, and moose. Especially since the demise of the American chestnut, with the mass production of every 2 years, so it drops a lot of acorns. Additionally, red oak is very fast growing, very tolerant of ground fire, heat, and drought. Um, which makes it sounds like a rather easy species to regenerate. However, there are a lot of regeneration challenges at present, including high seed predation. So, good food source also means a lot of species are enjoying it, and even when the acorns are germinated, there's also still a rearing of the seedlings. And then mature trees are also very susceptible to a host of fungal pathogens like oak wilt, sudden oak death, or root rot. And then relative to its mesophytic competitors, um, the same trees that are living in the same ecosystems like red maple and American beech, it is relatively shade tolerant. Um, and so it just couldn't really thrive um, in a closed canopy ecosystem. And now that we've got a sense of what the current landscape is like, let's take a step back to the past. Um, so Abrams 1992 came up with what is called a fire hypothesis. And it basically just states that fire is very integral to the management of the ecosystem. Um, and part of it is because well, fire has always kind of been co-occurring throughout history ever since the time when Native Americans were using fire for all sorts of different things. So, for example, in this picture that you're looking at, which is the hunting scene in 1631, the Native people used fire to kind of lure the game out of the forest to get a better vision to hunt them there. But also as a side effect, the fire really helps growing the understory, which in turns makes really good food for the game again. And then fire happens less with European arrival, and especially since 1920s, a lot of fire suppression policies, both like federally and on state level, kicks in and has since kind of promoted a condition called forest acidification, in which the forest gets moister um, and dark. And now looking ahead, regeneration looks like it's going to face more uncertainty as climate change expand its potential range northwards. So in the study by Iverson et al. In 2019, they did the distribution modeling of the future. And so what you're looking at, or you're right now, is the current distribution. Um, and right here is the potential distribution in 2100. Um, and regardless of whether it's like a moderate emission scenarios or business as usual, Red Oak is projected to move its distribution into the northern parts of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York. And so the big question that this research pose is that if we were to use prescribed fire, or like reintroduce prescribed fire into the northeastern system, will it improve red oak establishment and recruitment near its northern range limit? So essentially, we're trying to figure out if prescribed fire would be um, a proper way to kind of welcome red oak into its future distribution. And so, um, since in the past 2 years and a half, the study has been taking place at these 6 pairs of like burn and control stands in the White Mountains National Forest. Um, and just so you're all aware, everything's color coded in this presentation. So make sure that you remember the colors and the numbers that are associated with them, because the pair names tend to be a little long. I'm gonna just go into them in a little bit, but it's easier to remember that like pair one is orange and was shelter with harvest, and so on and so forth. And so the first 3 pair, 1, 2, and 3, were part of the White Mountain National Forest forest plan in 2005, that the Forest Service implemented with the goal of like actually like oak regeneration. And then so Stevens Brooks, for example. So Stevens Brooks is, if you could see my mouse, Stevens Brooks is located right here, which is like the Romney Plummer's Ledge area. Um, it was harvested in the early 2010s using the shelter wood method, in which roughly like 50% of the basic area was removed, and then it was burned in 2017. Um, and then this is another management area, Hawksback. This is in Benton, New Hampshire, so near like Mount Moselaw. Um, so there are 2 pairs here. One pair's received a seed tree harvest, which removes even more basal area, and then the other one received a shelterwood harvest. And then pair 4 was that kind of like opportunistically. So pair 4 was that Crawford State Park that doesn't really have a history of management, but we used this in the study because it experienced an actual fire in May 2022. So this was not a prescribed fire, and the burn stand was heavily burned, as you can see from these pictures. So, and then the last 2 pairs are from Bartlett Experimental Forest, and if you've been there, you know that it's mostly done for like the research of forest management, and so there are like a lot of different compartments with different harvest treatment ongoing here. And so in 2019, they did 3 pairs of clear cuts, and then we chose 2 of the 3 to study, and then the burn also happened in 2021. And then on the left, you can see the yellow fungus. So that is what causes the root. They were very abundant. Okay. And so having into the methods, I've said some of it before. We lay hundreds of transects in these 6 pairs, and along the transects, up here is a kind of like a sketch design of the transect. There's a series of 1 meter square plots. So those are the yellow diamonds, and they're spaced of 10 meters apart from their center. And then each plots were characterized by bird evidence, microtopography, and woody species abundance. And then in terms of like specific oak data itself, um, we observed a number of data, including leaf area index measurements, which looks at the amount of light that is available at a particular spot. We also did seedling counts in the 5 meter radius or the circle. And we did that 3 times, once in 2023, and then twice, first at the beginning of the growth season in 2024, and then the other one at the end of the growth season. And then in 2023, for every seedling that we counted in the 1 meter square plot or the yellow diamond, we aged them, and then we measured for height, diameter, root color, and presence of either herbivory or pathogen damage. And then we returned to these seedlings the next year and also did a beginning and end of the growth season surveys where we added some more variables, including extension growth, so how much the seedling has grown in a year, the number of leaves, as well as the number of live and dead branches. And then in terms of the samples that we collected, we got these leaf punches for carbon, nitrogen contents, and also like isotope data. And then we also collected lateral roots for mycorrhizal colonization analysis. So the next couple of slides are going to be a lot of graphs. I try to include photos that show like how we collect the data. So hopefully it would be fun. So first slide actually has no photo, but this slide talks about um, what is growing on, what is growing like on the ground. So these are the understory species, and so across all 6 pairs, like I've said before, they're all color coded. Hopefully you can see my mouse. Across these 6 pairs, there are a couple of very prominent tests, like competition for elk, including Lake Crew, Acer rubrum, which is red maple. So this is red maple. This is yellow birch. The birches also tend to do pretty well post disturbance. This is American beech, and this is gooseberries. Um, and a lot of the same species repeats through all of these um, pairs, and especially where the gooseberries are at, they tend to really flourish. And then in terms of what is growing up in a Wolver story, there is this really large presence of mature oaks in the highest diameter breast height size classes. So um, pair 5 and 6 didn't have any mature oaks in it. It had been removed during the clear cut, but these two these 2 pairs are the only ones that don't have a seed source within the stand itself. And then for these 4 pairs of stands, especially for the first 3, like I've said before, management was really intended for brand regeneration, and so therefore you can see that they leave a lot of mature oaks that is like 30 or more centimeter in diameter as mother trees or seed sources. And then we observe that in the burn stands, there are lower LAI values in burn. Like I've said before, leaf area index measurement looks at how much light is available as a particular spot. And so the lower LAI values signify more light availability. And so across 6 pairs, we observe more light in the burn stands versus the control stand. And that's a photo of Anthony measuring the LAI data. We Usually LAI data is measured kind of like as breast height, but we chose this height instead, which is about 50 centimeters off the ground, to kind of represent what a seedling at that particular height would get in terms of light. And then, so we aged one of our seedlings that we found in our plot, and then, I back counted all of them to the years that these seedlings germinated. And I found that most living seedlings as of 2024, they actually germinated in the 3 years following the burns. And the burns are signified by this red dash line right here. And so in pair 2 and 3, you see a 3-year increase in seedling germination, and then for pair 1, you see a trend of 5 years, just really awesome. And then in terms of seedling density, we found that seedling density in the stands were 3 times greater than the control stands. Um, and just to like get you an idea of like what a young forest looks like after like disturbances. This is a photo of my tech furnace, kind of just swimming in vegetation. So all of those sites kind of look like that. You really just have to, and they're really like my height too, so I just have to keep pushing at them to get through. But like if you're a seedling and you're like down under the site, then you practically receive no sun because it's like so dense. And yeah, everyone is like trying to compete for light and nutrient at this point. And yeah, we saw that the oak seedlings and the burn stands have um bigger diameter root color than the control stands. So basically they're bigger seedlings. And here's a photo of Chris again, measuring diameter root color. There's a lot of standing and then sitting. Um, we so there are more seedlings. Seedlings are bigger. We also found that seedlings grow faster in the woods. So here's just once again measuring the extension growth, which is pretty easy to look at. It's just like the green part that's spotted. Um, yeah, and then so now we know that seedlings are more abundant. Um, they're bigger, they grow faster, they also produce more leaves. Um, there are an average of 16 leaves per seedling in the burn stands versus 7 in the control. And you know, the big part of the study obviously um has to do with like the ecology of regeneration, but it also has a lot of management implication. So I just wanted to go through some of my thoughts when I were looking at the data. And I think the 3 most important considerations have to do with how fire could injure or kill mature trees, and how it affects acorn production and germination. And then once, the acorn germinates, looks at how fire can help with seedling growth and so just to dive a little bit further into the mature tree um, mortality. So this is a graph that looks at um, alive and dead basal area per hectare for um, five like most abundant species that have a diameter of 30 centimeters and above. And so a lot of the alive basal area is from red oak. So red oak mature trees survive really well from the fire. It only has about 3% of that basal area in comparison to American beech. So American beech is this fruit column here. So American beech doesn't have that much basal area to begin with, and a lot of the basal area was actually killed during. Um, so this is, really good news. And if you study red oak, you already know that it has many advantages in terms of like surviving the fire. It has thicker barks, um, and it also has faster compartmentalization rates, which means that it's like faster to kind of plug out the injury. And it also has better defense and resistance against decay. Whereas American beech and red maples are survival strategy is more in terms of quantity versus quality. Um, they sprout really fast, but also really easily. And then in terms of acorn production and germination, I wanted to touch on herbivory and then leaf litter. So fire decreases herbivory in a lot of different ways. So for example, like it kills weevils if they're like exiting from the acorn. Um, and it also kind of consumes some of the leaf litter, and so the acorn can penetrate into the soil. We also try to look at whether, speaking of leaf litter, we're also trying to look at whether there was a correlation between percent bare soil with regeneration, and we didn't find any. So in these two graphs, bare soil percent is on the x-axis, and then stem count is on the y-axis. And usually you would expect like a line trending upward because you would think that more bare soil would lead to better germination, but it didn't seem to be the case in the study. And then we also looked at the effect of microtopography and its correlation with seedling density. So um, the microtopography from left to right are concave, convex, flat, mid-slope, slope, and steep slope. And usually you would expect like concave microsites to have like better germination probability because it's where acorns could potentially accumulate. But obviously, if you have a dip and acorn could accumulate in there, then it also means that water can accumulate, making it perhaps a little moister than need be, or that more leaf litter could accumulate here as well. Um, and then lastly, wanted to touch on seedling growth versus its competition. So from the study, we found that oaks are more abundant and it's bigger, it grows faster, and it puts out more leaves. Um, and this could be, because of the light factor that I was talking about earlier with LAI measurement. It could be that oak is just soaking in all this light and really churning its photosynthesis to build up all of this above ground infrastructure. Um, Oak is relatively photophilic, meaning that it really loves light. but a lot of its early successional competing species also love light. So what if in another mechanisms in which oak can take advantage of. And then we were thinking about maybe it's the soil nutrient content. And we didn't find any long-term fire effects. And by long-term, I mean a lot of the burns that we study are over 2 years old. And in literature, usually fire is most effective within like a year in terms of either increasing nitrogen mineralization rate, which is like producing more um, like nitrogen in terms of ammonium, which is the graph that I'm showing here. So you would expect the red columns would be higher than blue columns, but it's not the case. And so the effect on the increase ammonium is gone. However, we also know that fire could burn off some of the nitrogen because nitrogen is relative volatile. Um, and so that is called emission of N2O and yeah, sorry. Um, However, if you're just also looking at the nitrate data, and I saw that there's no significant like leaching effects either, which is good. And then in terms of competition, so I've been talking a lot about the two competitive species against oak, which are um, red maple and American beech, and they have like slightly different competing strategies. So in terms of seed production and dispersal, red maple, along with a lot of species, produce really small wooden dispersed seed, uh, which is which could be good if the mother trees survive the fire or the cut, because then they would just deposit in large quantities on post-fire bare mineral soil that is really good for its germination. And then American Roots has really intense sprouting responses. Um, One thing that the study didn't touch on, but I want to mention, is that oak also has really good sprouting ability. One of the data that I've shown it's mostly advanced regeneration, meaning just like regeneration from acorns themselves. But if you were to count um, both sprouting responses to fire, you can also see that they're kind of neck and neck with American Beach in terms of sprouting responses. And so the takeaways that I've had thus far for this study is that many prescribers should be included in the management toolkit for northern red oak regeneration for two reasons. We saw that fire increases canopy openness and eliminates competition both in terms of like seed sources for maple and birch and American beech, but also the smaller trees, the seedlings are also dying off. If you use fire. And then we also see that seedling and burn stands are more abundant and grow faster and better. And while we haven't found like any particular mechanisms to kind of explain um, that growth, um, we do have some more data to process, including CNN isotope data from the leaf punches that just returned like 2 days ago. Um, and hopefully, the nitrogen isotope data will kind of shed a light on uh, how much nitrogen was lost during the fire. And then I'm also in the middle of going through my mycorrhizal fungal colonization data. Um, with the hypothesis that perhaps fire promotes more ectomycorrhizal colonization. Uh, and ectomycorrhizal mycorrhizae and oak are in a really good symbiosis in terms of providing nutrients to one another. And then this piece was not in my study at all, but could be really interesting to look at as oak below ground structural investment. So a lot of literature points out to the fact that oak um, tend to grow more root to shoot ratio in its first couple of years of growing, and it also has like dominant bud like under the soil to kind of help it um, protect itself during disturbance events like fire. And so it would be cool to devise some sort of study that would allow us to further like destructively sample the seedlings just to look at what is growing underneath, because the truth is a lot of the seedlings that I measure for heights, for example, like some of them are really short, but they could be 10 years old for all we know. Because deers could have just like clipped their top. And so I feel like below ground structure would paint this picture a little bit more complete. Um and and apparently I talked really fast. So finally arriving at the thank you slide where I get to thank all of my advisors and mentors and investigators, as well as our collaborators and partners, including Marco Yamasaki, who's retired from Bartlett, Steve Eisenhower and Andrew Fast with UNH, John Illy from White Mountain National Forest Service, who is also retired, and another person on my committee, Aaron Lane with the Northern Research Station. And then thank you to all of my techs. They worked really hard, and without them, half of this data wouldn't be collected. And then finally, funding for this study comes from the Northeastern States Research. That's about it. So I'm just gonna stop sharing. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Khahn. I have a couple quick questions for you before we open it up to any other. So if anyone else has any questions, please pop them in the chat now and we can go through them. So earlier in your talk, you had made, and this might be a silly question, so I apologize, but you had talked about the climate models were indicating that red oak would be spreading northward over time. Would that be good, bad, or indifferent for the ecosystem in those particular areas?
Um, it's not a silly question at all. It's actually um, it's climate change, I think, is bad for like humans as a species, but like, like throughout history, there have been a lot of climate shifts. And matter of fact, Canada used to occupy further north than its current distribution. And then it like migrated south like millions of years ago because the weather was getting colder.
Hmm.
And so now I feel like it's just kind of returning to where it came from. Um,
Got it. Okay, thank you. And then one other one. Do you know that part of north central New Hampshire, do you know what the general like prescribed burn interval is in that area that they typically do it? I know you had said towards the end there, you would encourage that process kind of continue. Do you know what the interval is like now, or do you have a recommendation for what interval they should be burning that area in at?
so there's absolutely no particular interval. Prescribed earth is currently not like one of the most like common like management tools for a number of reasons. It's costly. and the public doesn't like it. Um, and so some of the birds that I study are actually like pretty like pioneering in this area, just like in the previous like 2 decades or so. Um, and they were done by the Forest Service just to like do a test run and see what happens.
Hmm.
And so I was in a very privileged position to be able to kind of study this and see what comes out of it. It would have been really nice if the Forest Service had collected any like pre-treatment data, because I couldn't really, if there's no like particular comparison I could make like from like the pre-burn to the post-burn era. Um, but between the burn and the control stance, we're already seeing a lot of differences. So perhaps the both actually.
Got it. Thanks. We've got a question from Ava. She indicates you gave a great talk. She's curious about how successful the prescribed burns were for your study area. Did you have trouble getting fire on the ground?
So I didn't burn these. So I'm just gonna tell you what I heard from John Neely and Matt, my advisor. Um, some of the burns were better than others. So for example, like at Hogsback, for unit 28/2, half of the stand didn't burn as well. And so we actually only laid transects on the areas that burn well. That's why we have to like go into the site and like kind of kind of assess the fire, like the burn evidence, just to like make sure that the comparison that we're making across all stands are kind of relative to comparable, yeah, relatively comparable.
Okay, thanks. I hope, Eva, that answers your question. Got another one here from Shlomaya. She says, did you get a sense of how much weevil is reduced by fire? How much does that factor itself um, affect regeneration?
Mm. So I didn't really study the memory part. So I wouldn't be able to like quantify how much weevil is produced by fire. Matter of fact, literature is kind of lacking on like this aspects of like how fire can um reduce weevil. Um, and I mean, I only found like a paper or two that I like included in my discussion earlier, where it talks about how fire can kind of um disrupt some of the like parts of the life cycle of weevil. Uh, yeah, so definitely somebody start studying.
Okay. Hope that helps you, Shlomaya. Do we have any questions that you want to throw in the chat? Oh, okay, here's one. And this is from Reagan Wilburn. Before I read his question, I do want to give a shout out. Reagan's actually in Ireland. The North Atlantic Fire Science Exchange, we got to be part of a workshop that talked about transatlantic lesson sharing across the Atlantic. We're considered the Western, Ireland's considered the Eastern, and he's joining us today. So I really appreciate that we've been trying to keep this communication going. To allow to share knowledge across the Atlantic. So I'm glad you're on there. But he's had going back to your first question, do you, based on your research and readings, foresee this northern expansion of red oaks and the prescribed burns to have negative impacts on the species currently native to the area? Or will the burns have beneficial impact on the overall health of forests?
Mm. Um, I don't foresee any negative impacts, like I've said before. Northern red oak like came from this region. And so it is like very integral. It has been very integral to the ecosystem since the beginning of time. Um, and it's well, from like a management standpoint, everyone up here is just very excited to regenerate more red oak. It's a very economically important species to us, and um, and it's a resource that we definitely uh, want to protect. The birds have any beneficial. The other thing that we also talk about in terms of management up here is how a more diverse forest would be like a healthier forest and a more stable forest, like in times of disturbances. And so like adding red oak to the species mix like doesn't have any negative effects, and on the other hand, it's actually helping um, the ecosystem with diversifying um, different ecosystem services and um, yeah, is that something I would consider researching in the future? Um, I am not sure. I am definitely still, like after my graduation, I'm still staying within the realm of looking at how different management practice affect different ecosystems. Um, but it would be really interesting to see how the future includes for red oak, seeing that every year there seems to be a new disease affecting one species or another. Um,
Thank you, Khanh. So Reagan, I hope that answers your question. Yep. Okay. All right.
mm,
Oh, did
okay.
fire improve NRO Regen's competitive status in the new cohort from Matt Olson?
Mhm. I would say yes. Just in terms of like number. Um, so right now we're looking at, like very like high seedling density. And if the oaks are kind of like outlive like some of the early deciduous species, like that raspberries and birches are not going to be around forever. So there is like a certain height at which new seedlings tend to survive better than their competition. And it would be really good at that time to implement some sort of silvicultural management to release them into the canopy, if that makes sense, whether that being um, like a cut from, yeah, cut from below. That could be great. And then I just wanted to circle back. I was gonna say this when Eva was posing the question. I just wanted to circle back about the timing of the fire, and also circle back to your question to Eric about the current fire interval in the Northeast. The timing of the fire has been a very interesting topic in my head, especially because fire can be beneficial at different stages um, of. So, for example, a lot of people are trying to time fire with like the mass year of the acorn, so that like like when the acorn hits the ground, there's less litter, um, and there's a lot of nitrogen flux and pull for the acorn to take advantage of that and germinate and grow faster. But it's really hard to figure out when that mass year might be. We have an estimate, but it's hard because in the Northeast so far I've seen a lot of burns being done in the spring, whereas acorns drop in August. So you kind of just have to guess if this year's a good year or not uh, to do that. And then you also don't want to like start a fire when the seedlings are small because they're not as tolerant against fire then. So it has to be for them to reach at least like a foot. I think a foot is where a seedling is like competitive enough so that if a fire were to occur, it could be released into the can.
Great, thanks. Got one more question for you here from Mike. According to your charts, it appeared that beech and red maple were significantly impacted by the prescribed fire. Did you see any resprouting from those species afterwards? And are there specific burn intervals you plan on using to help control competing vegetation?
Yeah, there was a lot of beech and red maple sprouting. That is for sure. I am unsure about like the specific burn intervals. Um, I suppose it is kind of dependent on like what stage do you see um the seedlings are doing because like I've said before, you want your seedlings to reach a certain height in order for them to be competitive enough. I know from like some management around here that people would just like go in and like manually remove some of the springs and then like spray um like yeah, and like do some sort of chemical spray to like prevent it from sprouting back. With beech bark disease and beech leaf disease in the picture, I foresee maybe a future with less competitive American beech, which is like a bittersweet thing to say because I think a lot of people in management, like on the East Coast, were like not happy with American beech like taking up space. But it's always sad to see a spe like a species on its way out.
All right, well, thank you. I hope that answers your question, Mike. All right, I just want to follow up. We're coming up on the, yep, he appreciated that. I'm going to just share one last time here. Kind of wanted to highlight just a couple things. Let's see here. All right, just wanted to remind everybody that we still have two more talks in our Spring 2025 student webinar series. Our next one is next Thursday, April 17th. That's with Sam Gersio from Arcadia University, and she'll be presenting on constructing fire frequency and chronology for pitch pine and table mountain pine in Rocky Gap State Park. And then we finish up the series on April 24th with Eva Legg, who joined us today. So thank you. And she's from Syracuse University, and she'll be talking about unraveling the role of plant, soil, fire feedbacks in driving forest massification and climate resilience. So if you are interested in those, and we hope you are, please head on over to firesciencenorthatlantic.org. That's the NAFC website, and find the student webinar series page there. Or you can use that QR code that we've got right there, and that'll take you right to the student webinar series page to get more information on those two talks, our speakers, and also to register. And then finally, I'd like to say, if you or anyone else on this call would be interested in wanting to present and be a part of the student webinar series, again, my name is Eric Evanson. I'm the Science Communications Specialist here with NAFC, and my email is nafchelp@gmail.com. So feel free to email me, and we can get you set up. We're all set for this spring session, but we're definitely already looking into this fall with a number of speakers. So we really appreciate everybody being on today. And we also appreciate Khahn. Thank you so much for your informative talk today. It was great, and I think everybody got a lot out of it. So again, thank you all for attending. We're still going to stay on for a couple minutes if there's any sort of last minute question that somebody might come up with. Other than that, again, thank you, everybody. We look forward to seeing you in the next couple of weeks, and have a great day.